Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a jagged shard of pain driven through what should have been a skull. Kael tried to scream, but no sound came, only the dry rattle of bone against bone. He opened his eyes, or rather, the hollow sockets that now served as his windows to the world. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with clouds that promised no rain. Around him, crooked headstones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. The ground was damp, reeking of decay and old magic. He tried to move, and a horrible grinding sound echoed from his own body. He looked down or tried to and saw ribs, yellowed and cracked, barely held together by threads of sinew. His hands were skeletal claws, trembling as he raised them. No! No, no, no. Memory flooded back in fragments. A truck. Screaming. Then nothing. And now, this. He was a skeleton. A level 1 skeleton in some cursed graveyard. He could feel the system lurking at the edge of his awareness, a cold interface waiting to be called. He tried to stand. His left leg, brittle as old parchment, buckled. The bone snapped with a sound like a twig breaking. Kael collapsed into the mud, pain lancing through him, pain that shouldn't exist in a body that was supposed to be dead. He whimpered, a pathetic rattle of air through his throat. System, he thought desperately. Please. Anything. A translucent blue screen flickered before his vision. System initializing. Welcome, Kael. You are currently bonded to the bone of affection system. Status, level 1 skeleton. Bone upgrades, none. Warning, current physical integrity is critical. Immediate upgrade recommended. How do I upgrade? He thought, frantic. To activate bone of affection, you must attract the obsessive affection of a dangerously powerful being. What? That's insane. Kael tried to drag himself behind a broken tombstone, his snapped leg dragging uselessly. He could hear voices now, harsh, laughing voices. Hey, look! A fresh spawn. Easy XP, boys. Let's crack his skull open and see what drops. 3 figures emerged from the mist. Adventurers. A human warrior in rusted plate armor, an elven archer with a cruel smirk, and a robed figure crackling with green energy, a necromancer, probably here to harvest bones for his own experiments. Kael's heart, if he still had one, sank. This is it. I die again, and this time there's no coming back. The warrior drew his sword, its edge glinting with cruel light. Don't run, little boneback. We'll make it quick. The archer knocked an arrow. Aim for the spine. That'll keep him still. Kael closed his eye sockets, waiting for the end. Then the air changed. It started as a pressure, a weight that pressed down on everything. The mist curled inward, forming a whirlpool of white vapor. The ground trembled. The adventurers froze, their bravado evaporating. What is that? The necromancer stammered. The sky split open. A column of golden light, blinding and absolute, slammed into the graveyard. The force of it sent the adventurers staggering. Tombs shattered. The earth cracked in spiderweb patterns. And from that pillar of radiance, a figure descended. She was tall, armored in silver and gold that seemed to drink the light and radiate it back tenfold. Her hair was a cascade of molten silver, falling past her waist. Her eyes dots, her eyes were twin suns, burning with power that made the very air hum. In one hand, she held a spear that crackled with lightning. In the other, a shield that seemed to reflect the stars themselves. Seraphina, goddess of conquest, vanquisher of galaxies. And she was staring directly at Kael. Her lips curved into a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. Oh, she breathed, her voice a symphony that made the world tremble. You're adorable. The adventurers tried to run. They made it 3 steps before Seraphina raised her hand, almost casually, and flicked her wrist. A wave of golden energy erupted from her palm, washing over them. They didn't scream. They didn't have time. One moment they were there. The next they were motes of ash drifting on the wind. Kael stared, his jaw what remained of it hanging open. Seraphina knelt before him, her massive form somehow graceful. She reached out, her gauntlet fingers gentle as they cupped his skull. Her touch was warm, almost feverish. Her eyes, those terrible suns, softened into something that made Kael's non-existent stomach flip. So tiny, she murmured. So fragile. A little skeleton, all alone in this dark place. Her thumb traced the curve of his skull. Don't worry. I'm here now. I'll never let anything touch you. Kael's broken leg began to glow. Golden light seeped from the fracture, knitting the bone back together. But it didn't stop there. The light spread, infusing every molecule of his femur, transforming it into something that gleamed like polished marble. The system chimed. Bone of affection activated. Seraphina, goddess of conquest, has declared her obsessive affection for you. Upgrade, left thigh bone unbreakable thigh bone, basic. Effect, 正500% durability. Immune to fracture from physical trauma below divine tier. Kael actually gasped as strength flooded through him. His leg was whole. More than whole. It felt like it could withstand a meteor strike. But Seraphina was still holding his skull, her face inches from his. Her breath was warm, smelling of ozone and honey. You're so tiny, she whispered again, her voice cracking with emotion. So perfect. I'll never let anything touch you. And Kael realized, with dawning horror, that the system hadn't been lying. This goddess, this world-breaking, galaxy-conquering goddess was obsessed with him. And her idea of protection had just turned free men into ash. He was trapped. And somehow, he needed to survive her love. The world blurred into streaks of gold and ash as Seraphina cradled Kael against her chest. One hand cupped the back of his skull, fingers tracing the smooth bone, with a tenderness that felt utterly alien coming from a being who had just atomized 3 adventurers. Her other arm supported his spine, her grip firm yet careful, as if he were a priceless artifact rather than a fragile skeleton barely holding itself together. Kael's jaw clattered as he tried to speak, but only a dry rasp escaped. The wind howled past them as she descended from the graveyard's hill, her golden hair streaming behind her like a banner of conquest. Kael's bones ached under the weight of the newcomer's presence. This was a god. Another god. And he was laughing at them. Leave, therefore, Seraphina said, her hand moving to rest protectively on Kael's shoulder. This does not concern you. Valther's grin widened. Oh, but it does. Word spreads fast among the divine. The great Seraphina has taken a 星号 pet 星号. A level 1 skeleton. I had to see it for myself. He stepped off the column, his feet hovering inches above the ground as he approached. Is this your champion? Your chosen. He looks like he'd break if I sneezed. Kael felt a surge of fear and something else. Anger. He was tired of being weak. Tired of being dismissed. But what could he do? He was a skeleton with 1 upgraded bone and a head collection. Seraphina's eyes flared gold. He is more than you could ever comprehend. Is he? Valthor circled them, his gaze lingering on Kael's skull. Let me test that theory. He raised a hand, and a lance of crimson energy materialized, aimed directly at Kael's head. Seraphina moved faster than light, stepping between them, but Valthor's attack wasn't meant to hit her. It was a feint. A second lance formed behind her, streaking toward Kael's exposed back. Time slowed. Kael saw the lance approaching, felt the heat of its divine essence. His system screamed a warning, 星号星号 incoming attack, divine tier magic. Current defense, insufficient, 星号星号. Then Seraphina was there, her hand catching the lance inches from his skull. She crushed it, the fragments scattering like embers. Her face was a mask of fury, her aura blazing so brightly that Kael had to shield his eye sockets. "You dare?" she whispered. Valthor's smirk faltered. "Seraphina, it was just a..." She didn't let him finish. She turned to Kael, her expression softening for just a moment. "Close your eyes, my love." Before he could obey, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his forehead. The kiss was fire and lightning. A surge of power erupted through his skull, spreading like molten gold through every crack and suture. The system blazed to life. 星号 bone of affection activated. Obsession trigger, jealousy. Upgrade in progress, 星号. Pain no, not pain. 星号 transformation, 星号. His cranium glowed, the bone thickening, reinforcing, taking on a faint golden hue. Runes etched themselves across the surface, ancient symbols of protection and defiance. The process lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. 星号 upgrade complete, blessed skull, minor. 加50 defense against divine magic. Effect, passive resistance to god tier attacks, 星号. Kael gasped or would have, if he had lungs. The power settled into him, warm and reassuring. He felt safer. Seraphina pulled back, her eyes still blazing with possessive fury. She turned to Valthor, who had taken a step backward, his confidence crumbling. "You touched what is mine," she said, her voice a whisper that shook the ruins. "You threatened him." Valthor opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Seraphina raised her hand, and golden light gathered in her palm. The air screamed as she released it, a beam of pure annihilation that struck Valthor square in the chest. He didn't even have time to scream. His form unraveled, flesh and spirit scattering into nothingness. The crimson light winked out, and the sky cleared as if he had never existed. Silence. Seraphina turned back to Kael, her smile returning as if nothing had happened. She knelt, brushing a finger across his newly upgraded skull. "Now, about that hat." Kael's jaw hung open, the runes on his skull still faintly glowing. He had just witnessed a god being erased from existence. And the goddess who did it was now rummaging through a pile of headwear, muttering about finding the perfect fit. His system updated silently. 星号 obsession level, critical. Recommended action, acquire hat. Immediately, 星号. The star's core was still warm when Kael made his decision. Seraphina had been polishing it with the hem of her celestial robes, humming a tune that made nearby mountains tremble. She planned to forge it into a hat made of stellar matter, for a skeleton who could barely lift a rusted sword. He had to leave. He waited until she turned to examine a particularly stubborn nebula fragment, then scrambled down the pile of rubble that had once been a city wall. His new skull, blessed against divine magic, offered no protection against the sheer terror of escaping a goddess. Every step sent pangs of guilt through his unbreakable thigh bones, but self-preservation won. Beyond the ruined city, the world changed. The sky turned gray, then white. Snow began to fall, not gently but with a biting fury that seeped into his bones. Kael had no flesh to feel the cold, but his soul remembered it. He shivered, a rattling sound that echoed in the empty wasteland. Just a little farther, he told himself, though he had no lips to form the words. The thought alone was enough. His feet just bare bone now, since Seraphina had destroyed his boots during the kiss sank into the frost. The cold cracked up his femurs, his pelvis, his spine. He wrapped his arms around his ribcage, but it was like trying to hug a cage of ice. The wind howled, and he could feel his consciousness flickering. This was it. He was going to die again. Frozen solid in a land that had no name, forgotten by everyone except a goddess who probably hadn't noticed he was done yet. Then the snow stopped. Not gradually, like a storm passing. It stopped mid-flake, as if the world had pressed pause. Kael looked up, and she was there. She was tall, taller than Seraphina, with skin as pale as the ice beneath her feet. Her hair was a cascade of silver, braided with crystals that caught the dim light and scattered it into rainbows. Her eyes were the color of a frozen lake at midnight, deep, endless, and cold. She wore a cloak of white fur that seemed to absorb the falling snow, and behind her, an army of frost giants knelt in perfect silence. "You are cold," she said. Her voice was not a question. Kael tried to step back, but his legs wouldn't move. The cold had locked his joints. I'm fine." "Lies," she whispered. She stepped closer, and the ground cracked beneath her feet, patterns of ice spreading like veins. "I felt your shiver from my palace. 1,000 miles away, I felt it. Do you know what that means?" He shook his head, or tried to. "It means you are mine to protect." She unfastened her cloak and wrapped it around him. The fur was impossibly warm, infused with a heat that defied the frozen wasteland. Kael felt the warmth seep into his ribs, his sternum, his entire torso. It was like being reborn. But the warmth came with a price. As her hands brushed his ribcage, a surge of power flooded through him. The system screamed in his mind, bone of affection activated. New upgrade, frost-resistant ribcage, intermediate. Effect, immune to ice magic. Cost, Lyra's protective instinct. He looked up at her, and she was staring down at him with an expression that was both tender and terrifying. Her hand lingered on his ribs, and he could feel the frost giants shifting behind her, their eyes glowing with a cold fire. "Who made you cold?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Tell me their name. I will freeze their countenance." "No one," Kael said quickly. "I just wandered here. I was lost." "Lost," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "You are not lost anymore. You are found. You are mine." She turned to the horizon, where the sky was beginning to crack with golden light. Seraphina's domain. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "I sense her," she said. "The goddess of burning stars. She touched you." Kael's bones went cold again, despite the warmth of the cloak. "It's not what you think." "She made you cold," Lyra said, her voice hardening. "She wrapped you in fire, but fire leaves ash. Ice preserves. I will show her the difference." She began walking, her steps measured and deliberate. The frost giants rose to their full height, their breath forming clouds that froze mid-air. The ground trembled. "Wait!" Kael called after her, but she didn't stop. "You can't just." "I can," she said, without turning. "And I will. Stay here." "I will return," with her frozen heart. Kael stood alone in the wasteland, wrapped in a cloak that smelled of snow and eternity, watching the glacial empress march toward war. He had escaped one goddess only to become the reason for another's crusade. His ribs were warm, his skull was blessed, but his soul was screaming. He had to get stronger. He had to survive. Because if Lyra and Seraphina met, the universe might not survive their love. The frozen wasteland stretched endlessly under a bruised violet sky. Kael's bones clattered as he stumbled across the ice, his frost-resistant ribcage humming with a faint inner warmth that kept the cold at bay. But the cold wasn't what made him shudder. It was the silence. The air itself felt wrong, thick with a pressure that made his skull ache. He had been walking for hours, maybe days, time blurred in this forsaken place, when the first tremor shook the ground. A low, resonant hum vibrated through his bones, rising in pitch until it became a melody. A lullaby. Sweet, ancient, and terrifyingly familiar. The sky cracked. A nearby moon, pale and cratered, split along a fault line. The halves drifted apart, then exploded in a silent bloom of light. The shock wave hit a moment later, throwing Kael across the ice. He scrambled to his feet, jaw chattering. What? The song grew louder. The stars themselves seemed to sway. And then she descended from a rib in reality, a creature of impossible grace. Next, her scales shimmered like liquid obsidian, her wings folding against a body that was both dragon and woman. Her eyes were twin voids, endless and hungry. She floated down, her voice still humming, and the ground beneath her feet turned to glass. She saw him. Her song stopped. Oh, she breathed, her voice like chimes in a vacuum. What a precious little thing. So fragile. So bone-white. Kael took a step back. I'm just passing through. I don't want any trouble. Nyx tilted her head, a smile spreading across her lips. Trouble? I bring only lullabies, little skeleton. Sleepy tunes for sleepy stars. She gestured upward, where a second moon was already crumbling. See? They rest so peacefully. His spine tingled. The bone of affection system flared to life, a notification burning in his vision. Dangerous affection detected. Nyx, Void Dragon Princess. Level? Obsession level, rising. Wait, Kael said, raising his hands. I'm not a treasure. I'm just a level 1 skeleton. I have nothing to offer. Nyx laughed, and the sound shattered a nearby glacier. You're everything to offer. You're empty. Pure. A blank canvas for my affection. She floated closer, her clawed fingers reaching for his skull. Let me sing for you. He tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. The air thickened, pressing against him like a physical weight. Nyx began to hum again, softer this time, a melody that wrapped around his bones like silk. The sensation was warm, invasive, and deeply wrong. His spine arched, vertebrae twisting, and he felt something shift deep within his core. Bone of affection activated. Nyx's melodic obsession has upgraded your spine to void-touched vertebrae, advanced. Skill unlocked. Phase through physical attacks. 1 use per day. Power flooded through him, cold and strange. He could feel the void now, a thin layer of reality peeling back, waiting for his command. But the cost was immediate. Nyx's gaze locked onto him, her obsession now a tangible thing, a chain of sound that bound him to her will. There, she cooed. Now you're perfect. My little bone. She began to sing again, louder, more triumphant. The melody rose, and the third moon, the largest one, cracked like an egg. Chunks of rock tumbled through space, burning as they entered the atmosphere. The ground shook. A piece of the moon landed a mile away, cratering the ice and sending a wave of debris toward them. Nyx pouted, her lower lip jutting out. Oops! Let me try again, my little bone. Kael's skull throbbed. He could face through the next attack, but then what? She would follow. They always followed. He looked at the shattered moon, at the empress and goddess, who were probably already marching toward each other, and realized his escape was an illusion. He was a pawn in a game of cosmic tug-of-war. And the strongest player had just arrived. The Void Dragon Princess's lullaby had barely faded from the shattered moon's remains when Kael felt a new presence, a cold, sharp pressure against his soul. He stood on a ridge overlooking Nyx's lair, a crater of pulsing darkness where she coiled her massive form, humming another tune. His bones ached from the recent upgrade. The void touched vertebrae thrummed with a strange energy, allowing him to phase through solid matter once a day. But that didn't stop the dread crawling up his spine. A shadow detached itself from the star-scattered sky. It moved with a silence that defied logic, sliding across the ground like liquid night. Kael's skull turned, empty eye sockets locking onto a figure cloaked in tattered black robes. A scythe glinted, its blade etched with runes that whispered of death. The figure's face was hidden, but 2 pinpricks of crimson light stared back at him from beneath a deep hood. Reaper, Kael breathed, his voice a dry rattle. The figure Morta, as he would later learn, inclined her head. The noise is unbearable. That dragon's song scrapes against eternity. Her voice was layered, as if multiple souls spoke in unison. And the goddess, the empress, they pollute my domain with their obsessions. Kael took a step back, his phalanges scraping rock. I didn't ask for any of this. Doesn't matter. Morta's side swung in a lazy arc. You're a beacon. Every time one of them touches you, your soul brightens. It's annoying. Before Kael could react, Morta vanished. A scream tore through the night, a dragon's roar cut short. He spun to see Nyx's envoy, a massive void-scaled WRM that had been delivering a message to its princess, collapsed in two clean halves. Black ichor pulled on the ground. Morta stood over the corpse, her scythe dripping with dark blood. One down, she said, her voice flat. The goddess is next. Kael's system flared. A notification burned in his vision. Bone of affection, Morta's obsessive jealousy detected. Upgrading, left arm bone reaper's grasp, advanced. Skill acquired, drain life, single target. Pain sharp and searing lanced through his left arm. The bone reshaped itself, elongating, darkening, until it resembled a skeletal claw wreathed in purple mist. He could feel the hunger in it, a thirst for vitality. Morta turned to face him fully. Her hood fell back, revealing a face of pale, flawless skin and eyes like dying stars. Now, you're mine. No one else will touch you. She extended a skeletal hand, fingers tipped with obsidian nails. Come. Kael's mind raced. He could face once today, but to where? Nyx was still nearby. Lyra's frozen continent loomed in memory, and Seraphina's divine wrath could scorch this entire planet. Morta's gaze pinned him like a butterfly to a board. I have a choice. He managed. No, Morta's lips curved into a cold smile. But you can run. It'll make this more interesting. He ran. His unbreakable thigh bones propelled him down the ridge, bones clattering as he dodged boulders. Behind him, Morta's laughter echoed, a sound that froze the air and cracked the ground. Her scythe whistled past his skull, shearing off a tuft of moss. Kael activated phase-through physical attacks, his body turning translucent as he passed through a wall of stone. He emerged on the other side, gasping, if a skeleton could gasp. But Morta was already there, waiting. Clever, she said, tilting her head. But not clever enough. She lunged. The sky above the bonefields tore apart like a wound in reality. Kael, still reeling from Morta's skeletal grasp, felt the air itself scream. A pillar of golden light, so pure it hurt to look at, slammed down a mile to his left. The ground erupted, sending a shock wave that rattled his bones. He stumbled, his phalanges scraping against the ash-covered rock. What now? He thought, his skull twisting to track the source. 3 figures descended from the rift, each radiating an aura that made his soul tremble. Seraphina, her armor gleaming with the light of 1,000 stars, landed first. Her eyes, usually warm with obsessive adoration, were cold fury. Behind her, a blizzard coalesced into Lyra, the glacial empress, her gown woven from frost and her days a frozen wasteland. And then, a shadow that devoured the light around it, Nyx, the void dragon princess, her scales drinking in the colors of the world. They stood in a triangle, their attention fixed on the reaper behind Kael. Morta chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that echoed from beneath her hood. 3 pests. Did you miss me? Seraphina raised her hand, and a lance of condensed starlight formed. Release him, Morta. He is mine. Lyra's breath crystallized the air. No, mine. I will not let a corpse claim him. Nyx hissed, her voice a chorus of whispers. He heard my lullaby. He belongs to the void. Kael wanted to scream, I belong to no one. but his jaw chattered too violently. The pressure of their combined presence was crushing. The ground beneath him cracked, spider-webbing outwards. He felt his bones groan, the Reaper's grasp on his arm pulsing with stolen life energy, but it wasn't enough. He was a twig caught between hurricanes. Morta didn't answer with words. She raised her scythe, and the world went silent. Then, chaos. Seraphina's lance shot forward, a beam of pure divine energy. Lyra countered with a wall of absolute zero, the air freezing into black ice. Nyx opened her mouth and a wave of nothingness, a void that erased light and sound, rolled out. The three attacks collided in the space between them, creating a maelstrom of elemental fury. Kael was thrown backwards, his body tumbling across the scarred earth. He landed hard, his vision swimming. A stray tendril of divine energy, a loose thread from Seraphina's attack, arced towards him. It was the size of a spear, and it hummed with enough power to vaporize a mountain. He had no time to dodge, no time to face. His face-through physical attack skill was spent for the day. Instinct took over. He raised his left arm, the one with the Reaper's grasp. The blackened bone, etched with Morta's runes, glowed. He focused, desperately, on the skill, drain life. But it was a single-target ability, meant to siphon vitality from a living being. This was raw energy. It has to work, he thought, his mind a frantic scramble. It's all I have. The tendril struck his palm. Pain, white-hot and absolute, exploded through his arm. He felt his bone charring, the runes screaming. But the grasp held. It latched onto the energy, not as a life force, but as a source of power. It drank. The divine light dimmed, swirled, and was absorbed into his skeleton. The energy coursed through him, filling every crack, every joint. It was agony and ecstasy combined. He collapsed, his body smoking. The four women stopped their assault, turning to stare at him. The battlefield fell silent. Kael lay there, expecting to shatter. Instead, he felt solid. A warmth spread from his core, and a familiar notification chimed in his mind. Bone of affection, upgrade triggered. Combined obsessive energy detected, goddess, Seraphina, empress, Lyra, void dragon, Nyx, Reaper, Morta. Upgrade, adamant frame, elite, all bones gain +100 durability. Resistance to elemental damage increased. His bones thickened, darkened, and gained a metallic sheen. He pushed himself up, his movements no longer fragile. He felt like he could withstand a collapsing star. But the silence that followed was more terrifying than the battle. Seraphina, Lyra, Nyx, and Morta had stopped fighting. They were all looking at him. Their eyes, once filled with rivalry, now shone with a shared, predatory gleam. Seraphina spoke first, her voice a hushed whisper. He survived. Lyra's lips curved into a cold smile. He absorbed divine energy. Nyx's scales rippled with pleasure. He is even more perfect. Morta simply tilted her head, her scythe lowering. Interesting. Kael's newly reinforced bones trembled. He had survived the crossfire, but he had just become the most valuable prize in a war between four cosmic powers. And they were no longer just fighting over him. They were admiring him. The air around Kael crackled with the residual energy of four cosmic beings. Seraphina's golden eyes bored into him. Lyra's icy breath misted the ground. Nyx's void-touched gaze seemed to pull at the edges of reality, and Morta's scythe dripped with shadows. They had stopped fighting, but the silence was worse. It was the silence of predators deciding how to share a meal. Kael's jawbone clattered. No, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. I'm not a trophy. He didn't wait for their response. He turned and ran. His adamant frame, elite, bones clanked with each stride, the reinforced structure absorbing the shock of his desperate sprint. The ground trembled as Seraphina's voice boomed behind him. Kael, wait. We only want to protect you. Protect? Right. The same way a star protects a moth. He veered left, past the crater they had carved into the landscape, and spotted it, a jagged fissure in the earth, wreathed in purple mist. The locals had called it the Mole of Forgotten Souls, a dungeon that had claimed every adventurer for 1,000 years. Perfect! Without hesitation, he leaped. The descent was a blur of cold air and shifting shadows. His bones rattled as he landed on a stone floor slaked with moisture. Above, the fissure sealed shut, cutting off the light and the furious cries of his admirers. Silence swallowed him. Kael stood in a corridor of black obsidian, veins of pale blue light pulsing like arteries. The temperature plummeted, frost spreading across his ribcage. But his frost-resistant ribcage, intermediate, hummed, repelling the chill. He exhaled a cloud of mist and took stock. His inventory was sparse, the unbreakable thigh bones, basic, that had saved him before, the blessed skull, minor, that deflected divine magic, the void-touched vertebrae, advanced, that could face him through one attack per day, and the Reaper's grasp, advanced, that drained life. He had one phase left. One chance to survive a fatal blow. A whisper echoed from the depths. Then another. Soon, the air filled with a chorus of mournful sighs. Shapes emerged from the walls, translucent figures with hollow eyes and reaching hands. Soul-sucking wraiths. Kael's phalanges tightened around a loose stone. He threw it. The wraiths ignored it, gliding toward him. Their cold aura seeped into his bones, but his frost-resistant ribcage flared, keeping him mobile. He dodged a grasping hand, the wrist touch grazing his shoulder. Pain lanced through him, not physical, but a draining emptiness that tugged at his consciousness. He couldn't fight them all. He needed a plan. A corridor branched to the right, its entrance marked with a faded rune. Kael sprinted for it. The wraith shrieked, accelerating. One lunged, its claws aimed at his skull. He twisted, activating the void-touched vertebrae. His body flickered, becoming intangible as the claw passed through him. The face cost him a pulse of energy, but he was through. He stumbled into a circular chamber. The walls were lined with ancient carvings depicting a skeletal figure kneeling before a throne of bones. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single candle flickered with black flame. The wraith stopped at the threshold, hissing but unwilling to enter. Safe! For now. Kael slumped against the wall, his bones creaking. He had used his only face. If another wraith caught him, he was dead. He stared at the black flame. It seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own non-existent heartbeat. Then the ground trembled. The entrance to the chamber, the corridor he had come from, sealed shut with a grinding crash. Stone melded into stone, leaving no seam. A voice, ancient and dry as dust, filled the chamber. Welcome, little skeleton. You are the first to enter in a millennium. The black flame guttered. Shadows coalesced into a figure, a skeleton, taller than him, wearing a crown of fused vertebrae. Its eye sockets burned with violet light. Kael's jaw dropped. You're the dungeon master? The skeleton tilted its head. I am what remains of the last one. But you carry the scent of gods, of dragons, of death itself. What are you? Kael had no answer. But he knew one thing. He wasn't leaving this dungeon the same way he entered. The skeletal dungeon master's jaw clattered as it spoke, its voice a dry rasp that echoed through the obsidian chamber. The first trial awaits, little bone. Prove you are more than a collection of dust and memory. Kael's eye sockets flickered with blue light as the floor beneath him dissolved, dropping him into a circular room lined with dozens of chests. Each chest sat on a pedestal, their lids slightly ajar, revealing glints of gold and bone. But something was wrong. The air hummed with a low, predatory vibration, a hunger that was not his own. Kael's phalanges tightened around the shaft of a broken spear he'd scavenged from the corridor. He took a cautious step forward. One of the chests nearest him snapped its lid shut with a wet "xinghao some xinghao." Then another. And another. In unison, all the chests opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth and fleshy tongues that lolled out, dripping with acidic saliva. Mimics! Dozens of them. The first mimic lunged. Kael rolled to the side, his adamant frame absorbing the impact as he slammed against a pillar. He thrust the spear into the mimic's maw, but the teeth clamped down, snapping the wood like a twig. The mimic's tongue wrapped around his arm, pulling him closer. Panic flared, but then his Reaper's grasp activated instinctively. A cold, purple energy surged from his phalanges, latching onto the mimic's core. The creature convulsed, its form shriveling as life force drained into Kael's bones. A warm, sickly sensation flooded his ribcage, but a sharp pain lanced through his chest, a 10% reduction in his temporary health, a cost for the siphon. He released the dried husk, which crumbled to ash. The other mimics paused, their eyeless faces turning toward him with a new expression, not hunger, but something akin to recognition. Kael felt it then, a faint pulse of obsession emanating from the mimics. They weren't just hungry. They were drawn to him, to the power he'd stolen. He could sense their twisted desire to consume him, to make him part of their horde. Using this newfound awareness, Kael navigated the room, sidestepping the mimics that throbbed with the most intense fixation. He found a chest in the center that did not move. Its lock was rusted, but a faint glow emanated from within. He pried it open, and a leather-bound tome lay inside, bone forging manual. The pages were filled with diagrams of skeletal structures, notes on reinforcing marrow, and techniques to fuse bones with enchanted metals. He tucked it into his inventory, feeling the weight of knowledge settle in his skull. The floor dissolved again. This time, he fell into a long corridor lined with golems, 10 of them, each twice his size, their bodies carved from granite and obsidian. Their fists were massive hammers, and their eyes glowed with a dull red light. Kael's blessed skull began to pulse, a warm radiance spreading through his cranium. The golems raised their arms, and the ground shook as they marched forward. He threw a punch at the nearest golem's chest. His fist connected, but the golem didn't even flinch. Physical damage was useless. The glow from his skull intensified, and he felt a pull toward the ceiling, where a sigil of pure light was carved into the stone. A divine symbol. His blessed skull was a defense against divine magic, but perhaps it could also channel it. He leaped, grabbing onto a ledge, and pressed his skull against the sigil. The light flared, and a beam of holy energy shot down, striking the lead golem. The creature cracked, its form dissolving into rubble. The remaining golems halted, their red eyes flickering as they recalibrated. Kael hung from the ledge, his skeletal fingers straining. The sigil's light was fading, and the golems were turning toward him again. He had one shot. He focused the remaining energy into his skull, aiming at the next golem, but the beam fizzled, leaving only a faint spark. The golems raised their fists, ready to crush him. And then, from the shadows at the end of the corridor, a new voice spoke, a feminine whisper that sent chills through his bones. So, the little skeleton has a goddess's blessing. Interesting. The second trial chamber stretched into a vast, dimly lit hall. The air was thick with the scent of ancient dust and ozone. Kael's skeletal feet scraped against the stone floor, each step a hollow clack that echoed into the oppressive silence. Before him stood a line of golems, towering constructs of granite and obsidian, their surfaces etched with runes that pulsed with a faint, amber light. They were the kind of monsters that laughed at steel and shrugged off fireballs. Kael's phalanges tightened around his savage short sword. The blade was chipped, barely more than a shard of metal. He lunged at the nearest golem, aiming for a crack in its knee joint. The sword connected with the dull Xinghao Ting Xinghao and shattered. The golem didn't even flinch. Its massive fist swung, and Kael barely rolled aside as the ground where he stood exploded into rubble. He scrambled backward, ribs heaving despite having no lungs. Xinghao physical attacks are useless. Xinghao the thought was cold, clinical. He scanned the room. The golems advanced in unison, their steps shaking the floor. There were 5 of them, no, 6. One emerged from the shadows near the far wall, its eyes glowing brighter. Kael's skull throbbed. The blessed skull upgrade hummed at the edge of his awareness, a divine resonance he'd inherited from Seraphina's kiss. He hated relying on it. Every time he used her blessing, he could feel her attention sharpen, like a predator sensing prey. But the golems were closing in, and his other abilities were useless. Reaper's grasp required a living target. These were animated stone. Void-touched vertebrae could face him through one attack, but then he'd be defenseless. Frost-resistant ribcage was irrelevant. Unbreakable thigh bone was strong, but without leverage, he couldn't shatter these things. He stopped running. The golems formed a semicircle around him, their fists raised. Kael closed his eyes an instant from when he'd had eyelids and reached for the divine spark within his skull. Xinghao Seraphina, Xinghao, he thought. Xinghao, I really hate asking this. But I need your light, Xinghao. The prayer was a whisper in his own mind, but it felt like shouting into a void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his skull ignited. A brilliant, golden radiance erupted from his eye sockets and mouth, casting the chamber in stark relief. The golems froze. Their runes flickered, and they staggered back, their movements sluggish and confused. The holy light wasn't damaging them, it was disorienting, a burst of divine static that scrambled their magical course. Kael didn't hesitate. He sprinted forward, his unbreakable thigh bone glowing with a faint silver sheen. He leaped, twisting midair, and brought his leg down like a sledgehammer on the nearest golem's head. The impact was thunderous. The golem's skull cracked, then shattered, raining fragments across the floor. The construct collapsed into a heap of inert stone. He hit the ground rolling, already targeting the next golem. His thigh bone was a flawless weapon, unbreakable, perfectly balanced. He smashed through 2 more golems before the holy light in his skull dimmed. The remaining 3 shook off their confusion, their eyes blazing with renewed fury. But Kael was faster now. He'd learned their patterns. He ducked under a sweeping arm, pivoted, and drove his thigh bone into a golem's chest. The impact spider-webbed cracks across its torso. A second kick shattered it completely. The last 2 fell in quick succession, their bodies crumbling into piles of rubble and dust. Kael stood in the center of the wreckage, panting. The holy light in his skull faded to a faint ember. He felt a pull, a warm, possessive tug at the edge of his consciousness. Xinghao, Seraphina knows where I am now. Xinghao, he realized. Xinghao, she's watching. Xinghao, the thought sent a chill down his spine. The chamber trembled. Deep, rhythmic thuds echoed from the far wall, growing louder. A massive shadow loomed behind the remaining debris. The wall itself seemed to groan as a colossal golem stepped through the stone, its body a patchwork of ancient metal and enchanted rock. Its eyes locked onto Kael, 2 pits of molten crimson. The warden had awakened. Kael's bones rattled. He took a step back, gripping his thigh bone tighter. The warden's gaze was heavy, suffocating. It raised a fist the size of a carriage, and the air around it shimmered with heat. There was no escape. No tricks left. The dungeon had saved its worst for last. The warden rose from the depths of the chamber like a mountain waking from a nightmare. Its body was a mosaic of obsidian and crystal, each facet gleaming with malevolent light. 50 feet of raw, ancient power, its core posed at the center of its chest, a swirling vortex of absorbed magic that drank the ambient mana from the air. Kael felt the pull even from where he stood, a gentle tug at his soul that promised annihilation. He scrambled backward, bones clattering against the stone floor. The holy light from his skull had faded, leaving only the dim glow of the dungeon's torches. He had used the flash to stun the golems, but against this thing, it would be suicide. The warden's core drank magic. His flash would only make it stronger. Think, Kael. Think. The warden took a step. The ground shook, cracked spiderwebbing across the floor. Its fist came down, a blur of dark stone aimed directly at him. Kael rolled, feeling the wind of the impact rattle his ribs. The fist cratered the ground, sending shards of rock flying. He was fast, but not fast enough to dodge forever. He had one chance. The void touched vertebrae, Nyx's gift. It allowed him to face through physical attacks once per day. But that was defensive. Offensively, he had the Reaper's grasp, Mortis' deadly kiss. He could drain life from a single target, but the warden wasn't alive. It was a construct. Would it work on its core? Only one way to find out. The warden swung again, a horizontal sweep that would have turned him to dust. Kael activated the vertebrae. His body flickered, becoming insubstantial as smoke. The massive arm passed through him, and he felt a cold nothingness where his bones should have been. He was a ghost for a heartbeat, then solid again. He ran. Not away, but toward. Straight for the warden's leg. He leaped, grabbing onto a crack in the obsidian, and began to climb. The warden roared, a sound like grinding mountains, and tried to swat him off. But Kael was too small, too nimble. He scrambled up its chest, avoiding the grasping fingers, until he reached the core. It paused before him, a sphere of swirling purple and black energy. The magic in the air was thick here, almost liquid. Kael could feel it trying to siphon his own meager power. His bones groaned under the strain. Now or never. He pressed his skeletal, bony hand against the core and activated Reaper's grasp. Pain. Pure, searing pain exploded through his arm. The core was not life, but it was energy, and the Reaper's grasp tried to drain it anyway. The flow was immense, a torrent of raw magic that threatened to shatter his bones from the inside. Kael screamed, a sound that was more air than voice, as the power flooded into him. His skeleton began to glow. The bones in his arm turned white-hot, then cooled, then glowed again. The upgrade was happening, forced by the sheer volume of energy. His entire skeletal structure was being reforged, becoming a conduit for magic. The mana-heart skeleton was being born. But the cost was immediate. His health bar plummeted. 50 HP, 30 HP, 10 HP. The warden convulsed, its movements becoming erratic as its core dimmed. Kael held on, his grip weakening as his own life force was drained to fuel the transformation. HP. He collapsed as the warden crumbled, its body dissolving into a pile of inert crystal and dust. Kael hit the ground, bones aching, vision blurring. He was alive. Barely. The chamber fell silent. The only sound was his own ragged breath, if a skeleton could breathe. He lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the new power thrumming through his bones. The mana-heart skeleton. He could feel the magic in the air now, taste it, and know that he could convert it into strength. But he was too weak to move. His HP was a single point, a flicker of life in a sea of death. At the far end of the chamber, a massive stone door groaned and began to open. Beyond it, a throne room, dark and vast. And on the throne, a shadowy figure sat, its form indistinct, wreathed in an aura of ancient power. The figure began to clap. Slow, deliberate, mocking. Kael's blood if he had any ran cold. The throne room stretched into a cavern of polished obsidian. Each step Kael took echoing like a death knell. His bones clicked against the cold stone, the mana-heart skeleton humming with residual energy from the warden's core. At the far end, A throne carved from femurs and skulls rose 20 feet high, and seated upon it was a figure of shadow and tattered robes. The figure clapped slowly, the sound dry and hollow. A skeleton with a soul. How unexpected! The voice scraped like bone on bone. I am Valfor, the Lich King, or what remains of him. This dungeon was my tomb, and you, my uninvited guest, have awakened me. Kael's jawbone tightened. He could feel the necrotic energy radiating from the ghost, a cold tide that made his marrow itch. I'm not looking for a master. Oh, but you are, Valfor said, rising. His form solidified, revealing a skull with glowing green eyes and a crown of black iron. You carry the stench of a dozen affections goddesses, empresses, dragons. They will tear you apart, little skeleton. But I can give you power. Become my heir, and I will teach you to consume their love and turn it into strength. Kael's hand drifted to his ribcage, feeling the void-touched vertebrae shift. And if I refuse? Then I will unmake you and take that soul for myself. Valfor's hand shot out, and a wave of black energy surged forward, carrying the stench of 1,000 graves. Kael didn't think. He activated Man-Heart Skeleton, feeling his bones glow with a soft blue light as the necrotic energy hit him. Instead of shattering him, the energy was drawn into his skeleton, swirling through his ribcage and spine like a whirlpool. Pain lanced through him, his HP dropped by a third, but the energy was his now, a cold fire pulsing in his core. What? Valfor's eyes flared. You're absorbing my death magic. Kael didn't answer. He focused, forcing the stolen energy into his legs, and leaped. The unbreakable thigh bone carried him across the room in a single bound, his fist a cluster of bones reinforced by the absorbed magic slamming into Valfor's chest. The ghost howled, flickering. Impossible! That power is mine. But Kael was already moving, his skeleton adapting. He could feel Valfor's phylactery, a small gem embedded in the throne's armrest, pulsing with dark light. The ghost was tethered to it. You won't. Valfor summoned a wall of bone spikes from the floor, but Kael phased through them using void-touched vertebrae, the world blurring as he passed through solid matter. He landed beside the throne, his hand gripping the phylactery. Goodbye. Kael brought his leg up and brought the unbreakable thigh bone down like a guillotine. The gem shattered with a sound like a breaking bell, and Valfor screamed a long, fading wail that shook the cavern. The ghost dissolved into wisps of black smoke, and the throne cracked, the bones tumbling. The dungeon groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kael's HP was critical, a sliver remaining. He stumbled, but his hand found the fallen crown, Valfor's crown, and it clung to his skull, cold and heavy. Power seeped into him, a dark promise. He ran. The exit was a crack of light ahead, the dungeon collapsing behind him. He burst out into the open air, stumbling onto a hillside overlooking a valley. The dungeon entrance collapsed into rubble. And waiting for him, standing in a semicircle with expressions ranging from fury to awe, were Seraphina, Lyra, Nyx, and Morta. Their eyes locked onto the crown on his head. Seraphina stepped forward, her hand on her sword. Kael, what did you do? He had no energy to explain. He just stood there, a skeleton in a crown, feeling their gazes like weights on his bones. The dust from the collapsing dungeon still clung to Kael's bones like a second skin. He stumbled out of the rubble, the Lich King's crown a jagged circlet of black iron and violet gems resting heavily on his skull. His Man-Heart Skeleton, epic, pulsed with a dull ache, the absorbed necrotic energy still simmering in his core. He was at critical HP, his vision swimming with phantom pain. But the sight before him was far more terrifying than any undead king. Seraphina stood atop a shattered boulder, her golden armor gleaming even in the dim light of the twin moons. Her spear, Starpiercer, was planted in the ground beside her, the tip still crackling with residual starlight. She was arguing, her voice a thunderclap that made the very air tremble. I found him first. she snarled, pointing at Lyra. He is mine. Lyra, the glacial empress, stood in a patch of frozen earth, her breath misting in the air. Her ice blue gown was immaculate, but her eyes were stormy. You nearly killed him with that hat, Seraphina. He needs someone who can protect him without destroying cities. Protect him. Nyx, the void dragon princess, floated a few feet off the ground, her scales shimmering with the darkness of dead stars. She yawned, showing fangs that could tear through reality. You froze a continent because he sneezed. I sent him to sleep once, and 3 planets exploded. We're all terrible. Marta, the Reaper, stood apart, her side resting on her shoulder. She said nothing, but her hollow eyes watched Kael with an intensity that made his soul if he still had one shiver. She had killed a rival god just yesterday because he had looked at Kael wrong. The argument escalated. Seraphina's spear flared with light. Lyra's hands crackled with frost. Nyx's tail lashed, tearing a rift in the sky. Marta's sides began to hum. Then they all saw the crown. Silence fell like a guillotine. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. What is that? Lyra's frost retreated. That's the Lich King's crown. Nyx's rift sealed shut. You killed Valfor. Marta simply tilted her head, her scythe lowering a fraction. Kael took a step forward, his bones creaking. His voice was raspy, but steady. I did. And I'm not your pet. I'm not anyone's pet. He raised a hand, and the man-heart skeleton, epic, flared. A barrier of swirling violet energy erupted around him, a dome of pure necrotic force mixed with his own will. It wasn't perfect, it flickered at the edges, but it was his. The women stared. Then Seraphina laughed. It was a rich, dangerous sound. Oh, he's got teeth. Lyra smiled, a cold, beautiful thing. He always did. Nyx clapped her hands together, the sound echoing like a black hole collapsing. I like him even more now. Marta's lips curled into something that might have been approval. And then Kael felt it. A pressure, immense and suffocating, pressing against his barrier from 4 directions at once. Their obsession. Their love. Their desire to claim him. It was a force that could shatter worlds, and it was all focused on him. The crown on his head blazed with violet light. His system screamed. Bone of affection, collective obsession of 4 cosmic entities detected. Upgrading Lich King's crown to Crown of Absolute Will, legendary. Cost, the combined obsession of Seraphina, Goddess, Lyra, Glacial Empress, Nyx, Void Dragon Princess, and Marta, Reaper. Upgrade complete. Crown of Absolute Will, legendary, grants immunity to mind control. All mental effects reduced by 100%. The barrier around him hardened, turning from flickering purple to solid obsidian. The pressure from the women vanished, sliding off his mind like water off stone. He stood tall, his skull held high. I am Kael, he said, his voice echoing with newfound authority. I am no one's trophy. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a new voice cut through the air, smooth as silk and sharp as a blade. How interesting. They all turned. A figure stood at the edge of the crater, draped in shadows that seemed to drink the light. It was tall, androgynous, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that swirled with galaxies being born and dying. It wore a cloak of woven starlight, and its smile was the curve of a cosmic abyss. A skeleton with a crown of absolute will, it purred, stepping forward. The ground beneath its feet turned to ash. Wielded by a mortal who has captured the hearts of 4 such powerful beings. You are a delightful anomaly. Seraphina raised her spear. Back off, unmaker. Lyra summoned a blizzard. He is not yours to take. Nyx growled, her scales rippling. I'll eat you first. Marta's eyes glowed with deathly light. The Unmaker laughed, a sound that echoed across dimensions. Oh, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to collect. Its eyes locked onto Kael. You'll make a fine addition to my collection. Kael's new crown paused, but for the first time, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with Lyra's ice. The air turned to glass. Kael felt it first in his bones, a vibration that hummed through the crown of absolute will, sending icy tendrils down his spine. The four women who had been arguing moments ago fell silent, their divine auras flickering like candles in a hurricane. Seraphina's sword materialized in her hand, its edge blazing with stolen starlight. Get behind me, skeleton. Lyra's breath crystallized into a blizzard, her glacial domain expanding outward in a desperate shield. Nyx's void scales rippled, her throat glowing with a lullaby that could shatter moons. Mortis' sighs dripped shadows, her form twisting into something between woman and wraith. But the figure that stepped through the tear in reality paid them no mind. The Unmaker was not a being of flesh or bone. It was an absence, a hole in the universe shaped like a humanoid outline, filled with swirling chaos that devoured light. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of screams wrapped in silk. Ah! The little bone collector. It reached out, not with a hand, but with a tendril of pure entropy that unwove the fabric of space itself. Seraphina struck first. Her blade, which had carved canyons across galaxies, met the tendril and dissolved into motes of light. She gasped, stumbling back as her divine essence flickered. Impossible! Lyra's frost wave followed, a tidal wave of absolute zero that should have frozen time itself. The Unmaker's tendril passed through it, unbothered, and Lyra cried out as her arm turned to gray ash before she regenerated it. Mortis' sighs face-shifted, aiming for the entity's core, but the blade passed through emptiness, and a backlash of chaotic energy sent her crashing into a pillar. Nyx opened her mouth and sang. The note was beautiful. It was also a weapon that had cracked planets in half. The ground shattered. The sky bled. But the Unmaker simply absorbed the sound, turning it into more of its own substance. Cute, it said. Kael's bones rattled. His crown of absolute will blazed with golden light, holding his mind intact as the entity's presence tried to unmake his thoughts. He could feel it, the hunger, the curiosity, the terrifying affection that saw him not as a person but as a rare treasure to be collected. You're strong, Kael said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his jawbone. But you're not the first thing that's tried to break me. The Unmaker tilted its head. Oh! Kael reached deep into the crown. The dungeon's residual energy still clung to him, the echoes of 1,000 trapped souls, the lingering mana of the Lich King's defeat. He channeled it all into his mana-heart skeleton, feeling the marrow ignite like a furnace. You want to add me to your collection? Kael raised a skeletal hand. Then earn it. A beam of pure bone energy erupted from his palm. It was white-hot, screaming with the condensed essence of death and willpower. The Unmaker's tendril recoiled. The beam struck its chest, or where a chest should have been, and for the first time, the entity staggered. A crack appeared in its form. A tiny fracture, barely visible, but it was there. Kael collapsed to his knees. His mana was gone. His bones felt hollow, drained to the last drop. The crown flickered, its light dimming. The Unmaker laughed. It was not an angry laugh. It was delighted. Impressive. I want you even more now. The entity raised both arms, and the tear in reality widened into a gaping maw. Kael felt a pull, not physical, but existential. His soul was being tugged toward that void. Kael! Seraphina lunged, but she passed through him like smoke. Lyra's ice chains shattered. Nyx's claws grabbed nothing. Mortis' scream was swallowed by the chaos. The last thing Kael saw was the four women reaching for him, their faces twisted with fury and desperation. Then the world turned inside out, and he was falling into an endless, hungry dark. The Unmaker's voice followed him like a lover's whisper. Welcome to my home, little bone. Let me show you what I keep here. Kael tumbled through a vortex of screaming colors. One moment he was in the dungeon's stone chamber. The next he was falling through a sky made of fractured rainbows and weeping stars. He hit the ground, if it could be called that, with a clatter of bones. The surface beneath him rippled like oil on water, shifting from obsidian to amethyst to a translucent jelly that pulsed with veins of molten gold. He scrambled to his feet, his skeletal hands sinking into the gelatinous terrain. His skull swiveled, taking in the impossible geometry. Mountains grew sideways. Rivers of liquid light flowed upward into clouds that rained shards of crystal. In the distance, a tree made of frozen screams bore fruit that were miniature songs, each one wailing in a different key. Welcome to my gallery, little bone. The Unmaker's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't sound, it was a pressure against his soul, a resonance that made his marrow ache. Kael spun, but there was only the shifting landscape. The entity was the landscape. It was the sky, the ground, the very air he breathed. You see, the Unmaker continued, and a section of the ground rose up to form a throne of crystallized nightmares. I collect rare things. Goddesses, empresses, princesses, reapers. I have them all. But a skeleton who can wound me? That is a first. Kael's jaw clacked. I'm not a trophy. Everything is a trophy to me. The throne melted back into the ground, and the chaos realm shifted. The terrain flattened into a chessboard of black and white squares, each one a different reality. On one square, a civilization rose and fell in seconds. On another, a star was born and died. But you're special. Your little system, it feeds on affection, yes? Obsession? Desire? Kael's eye sockets flared with blue light. The Unmaker knew about his bone of affection system. That was bad. Very bad. I've watched you, Kael. You think your admirers are dangerous? The voice laughed, and the sound cracked the sky. They are children playing with fire. I am the Inferno. I don't just desire you, I desire your potential. Your growth. The moment you become strong enough to truly challenge me, that's when I'll break you open and see what makes you tick. You talk too much. Kael's hand went to his ribcage, feeling the frost-resistant bones. The void touched vertebrae, the Reaper's grasp. His mana was empty. His crown of absolute will was active, but it only protected his mind, not his body. I talk because I'm bored, and you're entertaining. The chessboard dissolved into a maze of mirrors. Kael saw his reflection 1,000 times, each one slightly different. One version of him was a Lich King with a crown of stars, another was a pile of dust, another was whole and alive, a human again. Choose your path, little skeleton. Find me, or be lost forever in the reflections of what you could have been. Kael stared at the mirrors. His reflection in the nearest one showed him being hugged by Seraphina, her arms crushing his bones to powder. Another showed Lyra freezing him solid out of love. Another showed Nyx's lullaby shattering his skull. These aren't futures, Kael muttered. These are fears. Aren't they the same thing? He ignored the voice. Instead, he closed his eye sockets and focused inward. His system was silent, depleted. But the realm itself, it thrummed with energy. Not mana. Something older. Something raw. It was the same energy that had flowed through the dungeon's core, the same energy that powered the Unmaker. Obsession energy. Pure, undiluted desire. Kael opened his eyes. The mirrors were gone. He stood on a platform of solidified nothing, and before him floated a sphere of swirling chaos, the Unmaker's core, or at least a projection of it. You sense it, don't you? The Unmaker said, its voice almost eager. You want to absorb it. Your system is screaming for it. It was true. The bone of affection system, had reactivated, pulsing with hunger. A notification appeared in Kael's vision. Detected ambient energy, primordial obsession. Compatible with bone of affection. Warning: absorption may cause irreversible mental contamination. Proceed? YN. Kael's hand trembled. His bones ached. He thought of Seraphina's kiss, Lyra's frozen tears, Nyx's lullaby, Mortis' silent protection. They were all insane. They were all dangerous. But they were also his. The only beings in this universe who saw him as more than a monster to be slain. He needed to survive. He needed to be strong enough to withstand their love. He pressed Y. The chaos energy surged into him like a tidal wave of fire and ice and screaming stars. His skeleton lit up from within, every bone glowing with violet light. The pain was indescribable. It felt like his soul was being unraveled and rewoven with threads of madness. He saw visions, the birth of galaxies, the death of gods, the endless hunger of the void. But he held on. He focused on his goal. Survival. The system chimed. Bone of affection upgrade in progress. Absorbing primordial obsession. New frame acquired, chaos forged frame, mythic. All stats tripled. New passive, desire sense. You can now sense any being's desire, including hidden intentions. Warning: mental contamination at 33%. Continue absorption to stabilize. Kael's bones cracked and reformed, knitting together with threads of chaotic energy. His ribcage expanded, his vertebrae fused, his skull hardened. He felt powerful, more powerful than ever before. But there was a whisper in the back of his mind, a seductive voice that told him to give in, to let the chaos consume him, to become part of the Unmaker. No, he growled, gripping his own arm. I am Kael. I am a skeleton. I am not your toy. The Unmaker's form materialized before him, a shifting mass of shadows and light, with 1,000 eyes and 1,000,000 mouths. Impressive. You've taken my energy and made it your own. But you've also opened a door inside your soul. I can see your desires now, little bone. All of them. Kael's eye sockets flared. Then you know I'm going to destroy you. Perhaps. But first, look. The Unmaker gestured, and the chaos realm parted like a curtain. In the distance, Kael saw a pulsating heart of pure desire, a core of raw, undiluted obsession that was the source of the Unmaker's power. It was beautiful and terrifying, beating with the rhythm of a dying star. That is my weakness, the Unmaker said, almost casually. Destroy it, and I die. But to reach it, you'll have to wade through the desires of every being I've ever collected. You'll see their hopes, their dreams, their darkest cravings. Can your mind survive that, little skeleton? Kael's new chaos-forged frame hummed with power. His desire sense activated, and he felt the Unmaker's own desire, a twisted, possessive hunger that wanted to own him, to break him, to make him part of the collection forever. He looked at the heart. He looked at his own skeletal hands, now crackling with chaotic energy. He took a step forward. The Unmaker laughed, and the realm trembled. Good. Let's see how long you last. Kael didn't answer. He just kept walking toward the heart, one bone at a time, the whispers of 1,000 obsessions clawing at his mind. Kael's phalanges closed around his own thigh bone, the unbreakable one Seraphina's kiss had forged. He wrenched it free from his hip socket with a wet crack that echoed through the shifting chaos realm. The pain was a distant echo, drowned by the roaring in his skull. 23% contamination, the system whispered. His thoughts felt like they were wading through tar. The Unmaker's core pulsed ahead, a sphere of raw, writhing desire, all the universes once condensed into a single point of blinding light. It was beautiful. It was hideous. It wanted him. You cannot resist. The Unmaker's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a symphony of whispers layered over screams. I am what you truly crave. Power. Safety. Love without consequence. Let go, little bone. Become part of me. Kael's jaw clattered. He tightened his grip on his femur, feeling the cool, unyielding weight. I've had enough of being part of things. He ran. His barefoot bones slapped against the unstable ground, which rippled like liquid mercury beneath him. The realm warped around him, walls of fractured mirrors, floors that became ceilings, gravity that shifted sideways. He didn't care. He focused on the core, on its hungry radiance. The Unmaker lashed out. Tendrils of pure obsession, black, oily, and cold, shot from the core, each one tipped with a face. Seraphinus, twisted with possessive rage. Lyra's, frozen in a scream. Nyxus, eyes like black holes. Mortis, grinning with death. They reached for him, whispering his name. Kael activated his void-touched vertebrae. For a single heartbeat, his entire skeleton flickered into nothingness. The tendrils passed through him, grasping at empty air. He rematerialized 3 paces from the core. The heat was unbearable. The light seared through his empty eye sockets, burning images directly into his mind. He saw himself on a throne of bones, 4 goddesses at his feet, the universe laid out like a banquet. It was tempting. It was poison. He raised his thigh bone like a spear. The unbreakable thigh bone. Seraphina's gift. Her obsession. He drove it forward with every ounce of strength his chaos-forged frame could muster. The point struck the core. For a moment, nothing. Then a crack, thin as a spider's leg, raced across the surface. The Unmaker screamed a sound that split dimensions, that shattered the mirrors, that sent ripples through the fabric of reality. Kael's skull ran. His mental contamination spiked to 31%. You will pay. The core exploded. Kael was thrown backward, his left arm torn from its socket, tumbling into the chaos. He felt the realm collapsing around him, folding in on itself like a dying star. He reached out with his remaining hand, grasping at the energy, pure, raw, primordial chaos. He didn't try to control it. He just let it tear a hole. He fell through. His bones clattered against the cold stone. He lay there for a long moment, staring up at a ceiling of black marble veined with gold. The air smelled of dust and old magic. He sat up, his left arm already regenerating, bone knitting together, stronger than before, threaded with faint silver lines. He was in a throne room. Massive pillars lined the walls, each carved with scenes of death and resurrection. At the far end sat a throne of fused femurs and skulls, dark energy pulsing from it like a heartbeat. The Lich King's throne. His throne now. The system pinged, congratulations. You have claimed the Lich King's domain. Your skeleton is now a mythic chaos-forged frame. Left arm regenerated and upgraded to chaos-touched limb. You are now a true Lich King. Current mental contamination, 34%. Warning, prolonged exposure to primordial obsession energy may cause permanent personality alteration. Kael stood, flexing his new arm. It felt right. Strong. He walked to the throne and sat down. The moment his bones touched the seat, a wave of power washed through him. He could feel the entire pocket dimension, every stone, every shadow, every soul bound to this place. It was his. A shimmer of light. 4 figures materialized before the throne. Seraphina, her golden armor dented, her eyes wild with relief. Lyra, frost clinging to her gown, her expression unreadable. Nyx, scales rippling, her tail lashing. Morta, scythe in hand, a rare smile on her lips. They knelt in unison. Our king, Seraphina said, her voice thick with emotion. We tracked you across 3 dimensions. We thought. I'm fine, Kael said. His voice echoed, deeper now, layered with the resonance of his new domain. The Unmaker is delayed. Not destroyed. But I have a home now. A throne. Lyra looked up, her icy gaze softening. You've become something more. A Lich King. Our Lich King. Kael wanted to laugh. A skeleton with a harem of galaxy-breaking women, now ruling a pocket dimension from a throne of bones. His life was absurd. But it was his. The Unmaker's final words slithered through his mind, a promise and a threat. This isn't over, little bone. Kael leaned back on his throne, his fingers drumming on the armrest. I know, he whispered. But I'll be ready. Outside, stars trembled. Empires held their breath. And somewhere in the void, the Unmaker began to reform, its hatred burning brighter than any sun.